Welcome back. What could be wrong with a group which calls itself the Proud Boys? Well, maybe you can start with the founder's description as a pro-West fraternal organization. Our emphasis, he says, will be on street activism, preparation, and confrontation. We will protect and defend our right-wing brethren when police and government fail to do so. The Proud Boys have shown up here on the Sun Coast, infiltrating peaceful protesters who were demonstrating in opposition to suggestions Sarasota should become a sanctuary city, which means a community that doesn't cooperate with federal authorities enforcing immigration laws. Joining us for more is Michael Barfield, the Vice President of the Florida chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, and Roger Davis with Progressive Sarasota. He was at the recent Sarasota protest and witnessed the clashes between the Proud Boys and those supporting sanctuary cities. And Roger, let me start with you. You were there. In your opinion, did the Proud Boys cross the line between protesting their point of view and interfering with others' ability to make their points?
Well, my impression, I was about 10 feet from where the Proud Boys entered the anti-protest group that was protesting against the Republican anti-sanctuary movement. There's many antis here. But basically, they moved into a very crowded corner where the Answer Sarasota protesters were and shoved their way in. And really were quite intimidating and physically, just shoved their way in and stood there. And we're making physical contact with other people.
Michael, where's the line? Because the American Civil Liberties Union and the Constitution, the First Amendment, protects the right to free speech. But if this is true, those people shove their way into the group protesting in the other direction, where does that cross a line?
Well, first, let me say we don't endorse their message or their tactics, but we've never taken the position that free speech belongs only to those that agree with us. That being said, the line for us is physical contact. Violence, any kind of physical contact that's unwanted, undesired, is to us inappropriate. That violates what we would consider to be your First Amendment rights, because it is intimidating. But speech itself that's offensive, that we don't like the message, that is purely protected by pure speech is protected by the First Amendment.
But when they say that their emphasis is on street activism, preparation, defense, and confrontation, and that they will protect and defend the right of the right-wing brethren when the police and government fail to do so, you could read that as a pledge to actually get physical if need be.
Well, I think that words like you just read, we've all learned that words don't hurt us, and that's our approach to it. It's actions that are physical in contact is where the ACLU draws the line. We do not take the position that because we don't believe in their message or we disagree with it, that they're not entitled to First Amendment protection to spew their message out there into the marketplace of ideas. In fact, the marketplace of ideas is built on the concept that unpopular speech needs protection under the First Amendment, not popular speech.
Roger, when you were at that protest, how did it end? How, were the police active in trying to separate both sides? Did members of the Proud Boys basically go away on their own?
No, the police were standing behind me and witnessed the same thing that I saw. And several members of the Answer Sarasota group also came up and asked the policemen to please, talk to the Proud Boys and, to do something about the situation that was developing, because they were being quite aggressive. It was the two gentlemen you saw in the news clip that that stood behind Julianne, I believe is her name, that kind of buffered them from her. But they stood there the entire time, the rest of the protest, and did not disperse.
Okay, we are just getting started, and we'll pick up this discussion right after we check on the weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing alt-right groups such as Proud Boys. The organization is gaining popularity right here on the Suncoast. Our guests tonight are Mark Barfield of the Florida ACLU and Roger Diaz with Progressive Sarasota. Roger, let me go back to you, because fair to say you take part in protests often around the Suncoast?
Yes, I do.
And in many cases, the opposition, the Republican opposition, is also protesting, correct?
Yeah, we often have people that are strong Trump supporters, and they're there, verbalizing their support of Trump, and, but I've never really ever seen this type of physical involvement before.
Because I want to be clear about that. The Democratic or progressive groups often are at protests with the opposite numbers in terms of conservative or Republican groups, but is it more or less respectful?
It is respectful, yeah, most of the time.
So this was different?
Yeah, definitely different. There was a level of intimidation. They were bullies. They pushed their way in and were intent. It felt like they were intent on trying to make a confrontation of some sort.
And it wasn't in defense of?
No.
Of anything the progressives were doing to threaten the Republicans or?
No. The Republicans were further down the block, and the progressives were on the corner, and they moved into where we were standing and purposely, came in to just kind of make contact.
Okay, we want to be clear about that. And Michael, has this happened before here on the Suncoast, or are you aware?
I'm not aware of it happening before. And just going back to that line of questioning, I think the Republican groups that were protesting were just as surprised to see this group come in as anyone else. So let's be clear about that. But jostling in a crowd is one thing, but someone, being a bully, shoving their way, physical contact, that's the kind of conduct we say crosses the line.
And we have seen just where this could go, because as Kate showed in her story, the situation in Berkeley a couple months ago was violent. You could get into who was wrong and who was right, but or who instigated it, but that was a very dangerous situation here. And I guess the concern over people who are watching this right now, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, progressive or a conservative, is that we don't want that here.
We don't want that here. We don't want anything to lead to violence. We certainly value the First Amendment. We cannot pick who is protected by the Constitution. Everyone is protected by the Constitution. But we don't condone violence. And we did meet with the police chief afterwards and express some concerns that there was not intervention when and if officers witnessed any acts of physical contact. We don't want situations to get out of hand. We also don't want to discourage protesters from coming to protest and expressing their First Amendment rights. And sometimes these events or these movements, if you will, are designed to do just that.
Well, what was the response from the police department?
Well, they were going to check with lawyers at city attorney's office, and they would, there was a favorable response that officers would be educated about what is allowed, what is not allowed in protests and counter-protests. Frankly, I've been to probably a dozen protests since the election here, and all of them, I wasn't at this one, but all of them have been very, no violence, no confrontations even. And the police department has done an excellent job.
Right, Roger, but you can imagine that there are people who are watching this right now will say that if you look back at the 2016 campaign, there were situations, I believe, in Detroit and places like Cincinnati, where it was left-wing groups which were accused of starting the burning fires and physical confrontations, and so they may be saying, hey, you got your troublemakers on your side too.
I have no knowledge of that. I wasn't in Cincinnati or wherever, so all I know is the people in Sarasota, and the people in Sarasota are a good, kind, passionate people that care about their neighbors. Answer Sarasota had, a couple weeks before that protest, they had a protest in front of Vern Buchanan's office, which was very peaceful. Several hundred people came out. Again, wanting to provide the message that we are good neighbors, that we love our neighbors.
Michael, we often talk about that we live in an increasing polarized society right now, and we're seeing that in our everyday lives and with the election and what has happened since. But this appears to be something else. This group predates the 2016 election, not by much, but we're hearing more and more about the alt-right and where it goes.
Well, I think that message comes from the top. When you have a candidate such as President Trump who appeals to that kind of messaging, that type of drama, that's the kind of conduct you get from people.
But he has made statements recently, whether it's about anti-Semitism or the way we interact with each other, which he has tried to ratchet that down.
Well, I can't remember. I think it was the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell who basically was begging someone to take the president's Twitter account away from him. Now, he has a First Amendment right to do what he does, but that sets the tone when it comes from that level, and people think that it's justified when they go out on the street and confront people.
Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, mental health care in our colleges and universities. Can we expect more alt-right groups like the Proud Boys to continue mobilizing in Florida? Where do you draw the line between free speech and hate speech? Our guests join us now for final thoughts. And Roger, I'll start with you because you're the person who is out there every day, and you've been protesting for years, causes that are close to you, alongside people who disagree with you. What do you hope happens here? Because this group is here. They have demonstrated that they are here now.
Right. Well, the news segment that was on the national news, that was on, I was in the green room watching it, and the State Department made a statement about the protests in front of the Turkish embassy, yes. And they stated that we support the rights of people everywhere to peaceful protest. And I think, that's really what, I hope we can have here in Sarasota, that the police and the politicians and our community support peaceful protest.
Michael, where do you see this going? Because obviously, as I said, we live in polarized times with, you could argue whether or not this administration and this president is responsible for it. But I'm sure that the Republicans and Democrats out there look at what happened in Sarasota a few weeks ago and what happened, out in Berkeley several months ago, and they don't want that here.
I would say that's true. They don't want that here. We don't want any incidents that would occur like what occurred in Berkeley. But, there's always going to be speech that is offensive to some. The beauty of the First Amendment is that it protects speech for all. But it does not protect violence. And that's where the ACLU draws the line, and I think the First Amendment has survived intact for many years.
You pointed out to me the situation years ago involving the neo-Nazis in this country, and they won the right to protest in Illinois and other places, but it didn't quite work out that well for them.
Right. I mean, I witnessed a KKK parade where we enforced their right to protest in Worth Avenue, and it didn't turn out well for them. In fact, they were jeered by onlookers and made fools of themselves. And I think that the First Amendment allows them to make fools of themselves.
Free speech, combating free speech. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, mental health care for college students. In a recent survey, 70% of college administrators named it as their top concern for their students. Florida's University Board of Governors asked lawmakers to expand funding for services in this year's budget. Their request was rejected. We asked you what you think about the mental health care services available in our colleges and universities, and John Forhan writes, it seems like the current generation that is in college and high school really can't handle life and want you to feel sorry for them. Well, suck it up, snowflakes, because once you're out in the real world, you are in it for a world of hurt, and many people aren't going to put up with your whining. Nice. Danielle Diorio writes, I have struggled since probably about freshman year, not because I was ill prepared, but because mental health is brushed under the rug in some families or not fully understood. Then bam, it's facing you full force and you're not sure how to cope. And Rosemarie Albee writes, how would any one of you feel if your child needed to talk to someone and no one was available, then went home and killed themselves? Some of you are the reason that this world is in the way it is. Where is the empathy and compassion? What do you think about the Proud Boys and their growing presence here on the Suncoast? Join the conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Michael Barfield is Vice President of the ACLU of Florida, and Roger Diaz is an activist with Progressive Sarasota.